Hi, welcome to Healthy Alternatives, where we explore complementary and alternative health modalities as well as other lifestyle choices that promote and enhance human health. Our guest tonight is Jim Woodworth. Nice to meet you, Jim. Welcome to our show.
Nice to meet you, Lauren, and great to be here.
Now, Jim, you are the conservator of the...
I'm the stewardship chair of the Great Meadows Conservation Trust. I'm a former president, but now I do other projects. And as stewardship chair, I have introduced an aluminum bridge to one of our properties where you can walk on a trail that's only 0.2 of a mile long, but it crosses a brook on a bridge and passes a marsh and a little pond where one day I counted 30 turtles. And saw a flock of wood ducks, chicks, ducklings, I guess they are.
And where is this bridge?
This is on the corner of Maple Street, Route 3,
right,
and Middletown Avenue.
Okay.
If you're coming down the hill across the railroad tracks to the light, it's on the right, and sometimes you can see it shining in the sunlight.
I ride past there every day. I'm going to have to check it out.
Take a little jog to the right, and there's a little parking. There's a nice sign.
Yeah.
There's a snowy parking lot right now, but when it melts soon, check it out.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity to explore areas that, we don't want to get our shoes messy, and we're missing out on a lot of wildlife.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I won't guarantee you won't get your shoes messy.
Well, if there's an aluminum bridge, it would help cross the
road. You can.
It would cross the thing. But, so let's talk about the Meadows Conservation Trust. We do have this resource in town, and I think it's totally underutilized by the residents in the town. So tell us a little bit more about these properties and where they are and what we can do.
Well, the Great Meadows Conservation Trust was formed in 1968. So it's over 40 years old. Eleanor Wolf was one of the original board members, and I can read you the mission.
Yes, that would be great.
The mission of the Great Meadows Conservation Trust, Inc. is to promote, for the benefit of the general public, the preservation of the Great Meadows and environs along the Connecticut River, located generally within the towns of Wethersfield, Rocky Hill, and Glastonbury, including the preservation of the rural landscape, the floodplain and water resources, marshland, swamps, woodland, farmland, open spaces, the plant and animal life therein, and unique historic and scenic sites.
That's a great mission statement. People might be wondering, what does this have to do with healthy alternatives? But, health is more than just, getting some sort of a treatment. And it really involves, being out in our environment and taking advantage of nature as a very healing effect.
Absolutely. In fact, they call it, I think, nature deficit disorder.
Nature deficit disorder.
To some people, but and along those lines, I might put in a pitch for our annual dinner coming up in March 21st.
March 21st.
Thursday night, and you can find out the details on our website. But our speaker is going to be Steve Grant, former Hartford Courant reporter, outdoor reporter, who wrote an article in December right after what happened in Newtown and said, get yourself out along a river. It will be a healing experience. And he listed various places, but he knew that he's a Wethersfield. He lived in Wethersfield for a while, and he knows the Wethersfield Meadows like the back of his hand. And
I know.
Find that.
Yeah, I think there's this sort of. People think, oh, gee, I've got to go to Colorado or Oregon or some exotic place to experience nature, but we do really have a lot of nature and wildlife in this Wethersfield, Glastonbury area, don't we?
There's 4,500 contiguous acres of marsh and woodland and farmland right here next to Hartford, and
which is amazing.
It is.
Yeah. With a highway going right through, but still, it's definitely there.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
And so the trust was kind of formed about the time the highway
Went
came
through.
through, and people said, hey, we better take care of this. There's always the famous racetrack proposal from about that time.
Really, I'm not. There was some sort of.
Yes,
They wanted to put a racetrack.
Yeah, these promoters looked at the new highways and said, wouldn't this be a great place to have Wethersfield's Churchill Downs? And we'll just put a dike around the Meadows.
Oh,
And
anyone who's been in the Meadows during spring knows how stupid the idea that is.
Exactly. And fortunately, things kind of coincided with the discovery that flood storage capacity is worth money. It's not just for fun, although kayaking through it when it's flooded is fun.
What is flood storage capacity?
If you build a dike and then all the water comes and goes up, it gets higher and higher because you've diked it out. And but in the Meadows, the water spreads out.
Yes, it does.
The Connecticut River has this sort of narrow spot down in Middletown, and the water backs up
from there, right?
From there, and so when there's a flood, it can spread out and not do much harm until it gets higher and higher. Unless, of course, you're a farmer and it floods in August, in which case
your crops are
right. Ruined.
So, in other words, the fact that there is the Meadows prevents a lot of the devastation in heavy rains to personal property.
Correct.
Right.
That's right. Yep. So.
So I mean, it's from an economic standpoint, it's worth preserving.
Yeah.
But really, a lot more. It is quite beautiful. I'm a biker, or not a motorcycle biker, but a cyclist, and I go to the Meadows a lot. And I have to tell you, it's very soothing to go there. If you go in the morning, it's one kind of vibe, and if you go in the evening, it's another. But it's very, besides the exercise of cycling, it's just so beautiful. And I actually took a friend in the late summer down to the Meadows, and they had never been there really never even been in the Meadows, and they were amazed at just the open expanse of it all. And this is a person that travels and has been many places, but so it is quite beautiful. So for anyone who hasn't really experienced the Meadows, I would encourage you to go down. And you have led some tours, winter tours.
Yes, every winter for some years, 10 years or more now, we've been leading, we call them brisk winter walks. Actually, we walk slowly, and I talk a lot, or the other leaders talk a lot. But and in the wintertime, when the nice thing is that there are no mosquitoes and there's poison ivy.
Ticks.
It's not a problem, and ticks and so forth. But it's a great way to get out. It depends on the weather. You have to. Some days it's muddy. Some days it's wet. Some days it's snowy. If you the last month or so, you've needed cross-country skis or snowshoes to really enjoy it.
Definitely.
But snowshoes are wonderful. If you haven't got them, it's the way to go in the wintertime. So we schedule our walks throughout the Meadows in all three towns. And this year, and for the last several years, we've had over 400 people on a total of the 7 walks.
That's a big crowd.
Which is a big crowd. We get great
Now,
publicity.
that's not a 400 at once. I don't know
That's
if people
correct.
are like, oh my God, that's a mob. But divided by 7, that's still a good
Although
number.
the smallest one was 4 people. And,
was it a bad weather day? Or
actually, there was a lot of snow, and the guy that we also partner with the Hartford area hiking meetup group, which is an online situation where people can join, and then they.
Is that through Meetup?
It's Meetup. It's
Meetup, but hiking.
But this one is a hiking one.
Right.
There's another one for kayaking, and the leader of that also lives in Wethersfield. But but anyway, and they canceled because their leader hadn't gotten his snowshoes yet.
No, he got caught.
And there were only 4 people, but we got out to the river and we looked down, and there was a pair of eagles sitting at the top. And that was
bald
right
eagles,
about
right?
bald eagles.
Yeah.
Right about Valentine's Day. Anyway,
So there's for anyone who's a bird watcher or
Mm-hmm.
interested in, wildlife, it's a great opportunity.
one time we saw a rough-legged hawk, which I hadn't seen before. It's different, and one of the hikes, which starts on Hartford Avenue, where one year the 135 people showed up, and we go in behind the backside of the cove.
Yes, by the
And the water was so high we couldn't actually walk there. So that was the first time I took people out on the dike. But this year we walked out on the dike, and when we got out to the river, there's a beaver lodge right there. And the beavers saw us, there are 30 people standing around. And they started patrolling back and forth on the river out there and slapping the water.
Really?
One of the people got it on his phone. So that was another nature experience that
you just normally wouldn't have.
you wouldn't have.
That's
unless you're
nice to do, and plus it's a nice way to meet other people.
Absolutely.
You have like-minded interests.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I have to tell you about the last walk, which was last week over in Hockenham Meadows, which is actually...
Now, where is that?
The access, well, another one interesting little piece of sidelight, it used to be part of Wethersfield, and we crossed a little triangle of Wethersfield that's on the other side of the river between Glastonbury and East Hartford.
Okay.
Who knew, right? Well, the river used to have a big hook and go like this. Down at the cove, there's a ridge where the Cove Warehouse is.
Yes.
And the river cut down but bounced off that ridge and curved around, and then in 1640. And then over the next 100 years, it cut straight through, leaving the Wethersfield Cove on the Wethersfield side. Since I grew up in Wethersfield, I always thought coves were round. But on the Glastonbury side, it left Keeney Cove, which is long and skinny.
What is it?
So Hockenham, I think,
Hockenham?
means hook in Native American language, and so that meadow, which used to be on the Wethersfield side of the river, is now on the East Hartford Glastonbury side of the river. And we walked in there, which is a really isolated place. It doesn't have a public road.
Okay.
It has one entrance that has a gate on it, and it's now owned by Goodwin College, so we partner with Goodwin College on that walk. And we're walking down along the river. The Trinity boat crew comes by practicing, and it's just beautiful and peaceful and quiet. And then we see a little red spot in the snow, and then we followed the red spots, and there was a deer with probably a coyote had a feast. And left bloody footprints as he walked away.
So there's it's amazing how much wildlife is surrounding
the
metropolitan areas here.
Deer tracks all over the place over there. And as I say, it's isolated, it's all wooded. And
this is, so how do you get to this cove for those who would want to? Do you need permission of Goodwin College
you
to get
do.
in?
Actually, the gate it's leftover gate. They purchased it with the gate, but there's barbed wire at the top of the gate. Makes it hard to climb over it.
Okay.
And there's a lock.
Okay.
So this was
had permission.
Yeah, so this was the
open.
opportunity. This was postponed, and Goodwin College has an environmental program.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
So this walk would be part of their class experience, except it got postponed and they had other things they had to do. Otherwise, they'd be with us. They joined us on one of our other walks goes out to Crow Point in Wethersfield.
Now, where's Crow Point?
If you enter the Meadows from just under the Putnam Bridge,
Yes.
and go straight out on Great Meadow Road,
Like by where the shooting range is?
past the shooting range,
Okay.
and come to the gate, you're on Crow Point, basically. But if you go through the gate, then you end up out on the end of Crow Point, and you see the Crow Point Cove, quote-unquote, which is the area that was dug out to build the bridge and the highway. It was basically mined, cut down maybe 40 feet. Now it's filled with water. It's filling back with silt. And Goodwin College purchased that from the construction company that built the bridge 40 years ago.
Oh. So all these I mean, you know, I'm down at the Meadows all the time. I don't know what anything is called, or there are lots of little sort of roads that, you know, you don't know where you're going to be going, so you kind of stay on the main drag there.
They put up gates mostly for the other roads. Those are really private.
Yeah, so, you know, you don't want to abuse it, right.
And the public, there's hunting down there in the fall.
Yes, there is, which gets a little scary when you're riding your
so
bike.
if you're riding on Sunday, you
wear
good.
An orange hat,
and wear your orange. Then you're safe. Game clubs are wonderful stewards of the Meadows, particularly Wethersfield. They have cleanups in the spring and fall. They fill dump trucks with trash that's dumped.
Well, I
down
have to say, and this is, you know, just an aside here, but the Meadows can get a little trashy, and the Cove area is just terrible, and it's just so dirty. It's very sad when you go walk under the where the
when
bridge
you go out there,
and then you loop around there, and it's really horrible because it's quite. I mean, there's lots of fallen trees and things like that, and you know that's part of nature. But then it's just not.
There's
nice.
so many bottles, and one of the
what is that? Just washing up, or is
people
are going there and partying and just leaving
true.
their garbage?
But they're
behind.
also partying all the way up the river, and that's all coming down the river.
So it washes down.
And then inside, what you haven't seen is the backside of the Cove on the edge of 91 and Route 15, or the dike on the other side. That's the corner where it's really messy, believe it or not. There's 60 years of bottles and plastic straws, and
it's like becoming an island into itself.
I call it. I made a video one time. I call it the Wethersfield vortex. You know, the vortex in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where all the plastic ends up. We have our own there because once they built 91 across there, the water can't wash out. And it just sits there. Comes off the highway, washes out of Folly Brook, off the streets of Wethersfield and Hartford, and it just sits out there. So when we have cleanups, MDC runs a cleanup in it participates in the Source to the Sea cleanup in end of September, early October, where this is the Connecticut River Watershed Council. Runs a cleanup from Long Island Sound as far up into Vermont, New Hampshire as possible.
And they do it every fall.
And they haul trash out. This year is kind of famous. Wethersfield is one of the famous places because they brought in the a state police dive team.
What did they find? And
Corona Auto Parts record. Down in the Meadows, next time you're biking down there, you know where the Jersey barriers are?
Yeah.
And then you come out on that area. There's a.
I saw an old car there this fall. Is that what they dragged out? There was an old car?
Might have been if it was a wreck.
It was a wreck.
Yeah. So that was in September.
Yeah.
1st of October.
I saw it. I was like,
yeah.
what the heck happened here?
So what happens is that's an easy place to get in the river. So say you want to ditch a car. And so the divers came along, and they've got fancy radar and stuff. They found at least a dozen cars. And
who would want to ditch a car in the river?
Well, I guess
if there was like a body in it or something.
Yeah, and there were no bodies.
Oh, okay.
But they pulled it. They hooked the Corona Auto Parts cable on and pulled out. I call it a catch of the day. It was a Honda Civic. They pulled up.
Yeah.
And then they pulled up a Chevy van. Unfortunately, the van was intact underwater, but when it came up, sheet metal parts fell off, and they said, whoa, wait a minute, we're creating more of a problem than we are. And they stopped there. But the only bodies were a bunch of mussels about this big in one of the crevices.
Wow.
So there's life down there. This happens to be, one of those areas where the current kind of cuts in and is fairly deep. Mm-hmm. So if you dump a car there, it kind of moves down a ways too. Mm-hmm. And they said there was a 40-foot flatbed truck.
Unbelievable.
I always thought that it was when they closed up the Portland quarry.
Yeah.
the dumping cars, and they cleaned that out, that this became, but this has
The
been
new
going,
spot.
Yeah, but it's been going on for a long time,
Yeah.
I guess, so.
Which is probably
Yeah.
infuriating, especially to someone like you.
Yeah, but.
Well, I
you
mean,
know,
you put a lot, you really are a steward
But
of
I
the environment.
started to talk about the backside of the cove. It's just unbelievable. And I called it the Wethersfield Vortex. I actually have a YouTube video that shows. One year it was really warm. I paddled in there in February, a sunny February day, and it was just floating, solid floating plastic
Unbelievable.
out back there.
Huh.
I actually.
Now, do you do kayak tours too, or
Well,
mostly
you know,
just walking
we
and
started
cycling?
we started doing kayak tours, and then our insurance carrier
Yeah.
said no. But this.
So you have an insurance carrier to conduct these tours?
We have insurance, yeah, liability insurance.
Okay, in
yeah.
case somebody-
and even if somebody's touring, or if somebody just walks out there and falls down and breaks their neck, it's your fault.
That's pretty extreme. maybe an ankle or something like
Well,
that.
in the Crow Point Cove, somebody did fall down and break their arm, and they sued the game club and the
Oh my
the.
gosh.
So.
Well, what do you do?
Such is modern life,
What
I
do you
guess.
do?
But yeah,
So now let's talk a little health here, if we
Yeah,
can
so-
divert a little bit, because
well, I got diverted. I think this is what we should be talking about.
what? Oh,
Health.
oh yeah, no. Well, I
Okay.
I think it's important that people know that this resource is here because they can use it.
That's right.
And get what is kind of, and I don't want to like offend anybody, but it's become almost kind of political now about movement and
That's correct. yeah.
exercise, and people feel like the government's telling me I should exercise or whatever. Please, we're not doing that, but there's enough studies out there, and you doctors and scientists alike are telling us we need to move more as human beings. We sit too much, right?
Absolutely.
And we don't move. We
Yeah.
don't move enough. And people are, well, gee, what am I supposed to do? Join a gym but it's as simple as walking. Let's
Absolutely.
just talk about
Yeah.
walking.
I'm fortunate to live in Old Wethersfield, and
The beautiful place to walk.
It's as walkable a place in the world as you can find, and
Yeah.
it's so lucky. And then if you add the Meadows onto it, it's fantastic.
Now, you were telling, so you're an avid walker and cyclist,
Yes,
right? And now,
and kayaker and bicycles.
well, that's what I meant,
Yes.
cyclist. Right.
Yeah,
And if you don't mind me sharing, you just told us before we were on the air that you have just recently retired.
Yes, I'm semi-retired.
You're
now. Yeah.
but what I was trying to get at, Jim, was that you are your age. You're
I'm,
very fit. I wish Jim would stand up because he's very fit. You're very fit.
I'm 65 years young, as they say.
A lot of energy, and I'm sure that, or maybe I'm wrong to say, but I'm sure your lifestyle contributes to
That's
your
right. Yeah.
health.
That's the
and
way
fitness.
I feel. And what has worked out for me is that I really enjoy getting out into nature and doing that kind of exercise, and therefore I do it. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm going to do this
Go to the
boring,
gym,
repetitive,
right,
unpleasant thing, it's not going to happen. So that's why finding the right spot to walk is so key, I think, to a healthy lifestyle.
And then the cycling, we are fortunate. A lot of people don't want to, understandably so, ride a bike in a heavily trafficked area.
Absolutely.
But Old Wethersfield is a great place to bike.
It is.
And even parts of Wethersfield, there's a lot of residential area. But we do have this Meadows.
That's correct.
That's
and
a really...
It's flat. It may be a little bumpy, but it's flat.
Exactly.
And
Getting there might require a hill or two, but once you're there, it is very
Unfortunately,
flat.
for most people, it's downhill, and then when you go back,
You're
it's
coming
uphill.
here.
But.
And now, and how many? What's the loop miles wise? Have you ever
Well,
from like one end to the other?
I think it's maybe it's only about 5 miles. I think our round trip of bicycle ride was like 12 miles.
Right.
And that included from the Cove through the Meadows, across the ferry, and that mile or so up to Killen-Bassett Farm and on Tryon Road and then back again. But that's such a pleasant bike ride, and it's one you can do. You can do part of it. You can turn around and come back. You can work yourself up to.
Right.
That is just, it's perfect.
Yeah, and people think, oh, 12 miles on a bike. Believe me, it's not really that. It's not that demanding. It's doable.
Right. Yeah.
It's really doable. And I was reading a study online, or actually a synopsis of it, and they tracked people. Because it's not just our physical health, but it's our emotional well-being also. And they were doing a study of antidepressants. So they had 3 groups. They had people who were taking the antidepressants only, exercise and antidepressants, and then just exercise. And the people that just did exercise had the greatest improvement in their overall mood and levels of anxiety, because I think that it's a great way to burn off stress and anxieties, to get out there and move. And it's not like you need a trainer.
Yeah, if you need to go faster, you can go faster. But if you want to linger, it's forget about their troubles. That's what. And one of the things that we had talked about also was in the other day in Hartford Current was the allusion to the fact that we will have by 2014 a bicycle path across the river on the bridge.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Jim, because I am really excited about that.
I haven't seen the details about how they're going to get up and how they're going to get down and how to get up to Glastonbury on the other side, but which involves going through the Meadows on that side. But something about building a temporary ramp for the construction, and then they're just going to leave it there. And that'll be the bicycle,
the bike path,
the pedestrian path. And all the other bridges on the Connecticut River have that because they were built after ours when bicycling came, it was what you did. And there's one on the Bissell Bridge, and there's one on the 190 bridge up.
There's even one on the George Washington Bridge in New York. I mean, how much more metropolitan can you get than that?
Yep.
Right. Exactly.
So we'll connect Wethersfield and Glastonbury. In the summertime, if the ferry's running, you could make a loop.
Lots to do, and even a great family activity too.
Yeah, even if you just get up on the bridge and then you got that view.
Well, that's the other thing, because I work part-time in Glastonbury, and you're driving, and you get up to that top, and the view is spectacular. And even with if the sun is setting, it's very, very pretty. Yeah. So now you have a meeting coming up this Monday. Why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and all I know is that I was invited because we do these walks, but it's the Connecticut, what is it? The Central Connecticut Health District is having a meeting, pulling in, which is Rocky Hill, Newington, and Berlin, I think. So pulling in the Park and Recs people from all 3 towns and people like us that have walks. I think they got a grant to kind of encourage getting out and walking. So that's what we're going to talk about, and they're hoping to help publicize our Connecticut Trails Day walks, which, by the way, statewide, there's something like 300 different guided hikes and bike rides, all happening on the same weekend.
And that weekend is?
June 1st and 2nd.
June 1st and 2nd.
Yeah,
and we will have ours here.
We will. The Gray Meadows Trust has the one that I'll be leading at Crow Point, which I think was on tape somewhere from a past year. But anyway, we'll have that one. Ken Etheridge, one of our members from Rocky Hill, is going to lead one from the Rocky Hill Ferry Landing. They go into the Meadows, and he's a real birder, so he's likely to see 50 different kinds of birds.
Unbelievable.
Walking through the Meadows.
So that'll be more of a walk.
Yes, and that'll be definitely a walk. Both of those, there'll be 2 walks. And then on Sunday, I'll lead a bike ride from the Wethersfield Cove through the Meadows, across the river to Killen-Bassett Farm and back.
Oh, okay, so Saturday's walking and Sunday is riding.
That's right. You got to do both. One day, one the other day. Absolutely.
Well, we'll hope for good weather.
Yes.
At least for Sunday, because
last year it poured on that Saturday.
Yeah.
And that's a Goodwin College class outing.
Oh.
So we had 10 people, not all Goodwin College, but most of them. It was raining and pouring, but there was a lot of smiles, so I got a picture.
Yeah, walking in the rain, riding in the heavy rain is a little tough on the eyes.
You can't see.
It's tough to do. It's tough to do.
But walking, if you just got to wear the right outfit,
gear, yeah,
and then you're all set. Mm-hmm. And now that bike ride, and the last couple of years I've repeated on the day of the Corn Fest.
Oh, okay.
Or the morning of the Corn Fest. So we do the ride and we come back, and then you can have lunch at the Corn Fest.
And you can eat a little bit more because you've gone on a nice
Absolutely,
bike ride.
Yes. Yeah. And you've seen where the corn came from for the Corn Fest.
Well, that's true too.
And in the fall, that first year that we did it, I think I started to tell you that Hurricane Irene and Lee had come in, and Lee had just gone the week before. Christopher Shepard said, "Hey, why don't you plan a bike ride?" And it was sunny and beautiful. And then those things came along, and the water went down that Sunday. So I went in with my bicycle, and I got, from here to there.
It gets totally washed out.
I always said that stepping into the Meadows is like stepping into Vermont. And this time it was literally stepping into Vermont because all that silt had come down from Vermont.
Right.
But by the end of the week, it had all dried up. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, they started up the ferry Friday and Saturday for us to take the ferry across. So it was a beautiful thing.
So it wasn't. You
no,
could still do it.
You'd see that you saw the devastation. And there's a road in Rocky Hill that in the Meadows that cuts across the Meadows. It's kind of has a fence and so forth. And in the wintertime, there's always a drift of snow, but now there was a drift of pumpkins.
Oh.
And all this, beautiful corn, all kind of looking gray and
all broken
destroyed
up.
and
Yeah.
whatnot. And one of the things the Great Meadows Conservation Trust is support farmers, and so.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
We actually lease some of our properties to farmers, and in Wethersfield is the Anderson Farms, who farms on Elm Street, but also out in the Meadows. And their stand is on Broad Street, but they also supply, I think, 10 other stands, and they deliver corn all around the state from Great Meadows.
Wow. And then there's a turf farm.
And then there's the turf farm, which is a profitable enterprise and has a number of acres in Wethersfield.
And they also, are nice to let people
and they are wonderful.
Through. Yeah,
yes,
very nice.
They encourage so if you go into the Meadows, there's nature, there's agriculture, and then there's the model airplanes flying on the turf farm. They purchase a square of turf from the turf farm, and then they use that, and then they rotate to other places up and down the area, and that's kind of an amazing activity.
Oh, the planes.
Yeah. And then there's also a New England ultimate frisbee organization, and so. And
there's motocross.
Yes, there is.
I know it's kind of an antithesis, but
well, that's true. But just the ultimate.
But that is an activity also.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's going on.
A certain amount of physical activity involved.
Absolutely. I mean, those keep people flying through the air.
Yeah, it's okay.
And they have the mini one with the little kids flying through the air, and the big one with big kids flying through the air.
And they stay, on where they should.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not like people are trashing the fields with their motocross.
That's true.
They're.
It's not like somebody doesn't, but most of those people.
You know what I have noticed, because I've been riding down the Meadows now for quite a while, and there was a time when it seemed like people were taking liberties in the field, like cars, digging up the turf, and I'm thinking, what the.
Well, sometimes they think that some kid, and let's assume some idiot in a car thinks it's a great thing to do. They go out and tear up the field. But what they don't realize is it's also muddy, and then they get stuck out there. So somebody has to come and tow them out. So there's some poetic justice going on there. But it's thousands of dollars. In that flood, Anderson Farms lost $100,000 worth of corn retail.
Wow.
And Fairweather Acres, which, by the way, Fairweather Acres.
Now, what's Fairweather Acres?
Fairweather Acres has a farm stand on Cromwell Avenue in Rocky Hill, almost to Cromwell. That's Route 3.
Okay, yeah.
Almost to Cromwell. And they are still, they have been for a number of years, the largest green bean farm operation in New England. Their competitors are, which are much larger than them, but are out in Pennsylvania, New York State, New Jersey someplace. And in the Meadows, they have...
I see green beans down there.
Yeah. So there's
So that's
acres
Fairweather Acres.
Fairweather Acres, the Collins family, Billy Collins and Michelle Collins. And but it's a tough business because it's a wholesale business, so they've cut back a little bit. And on their green beans, they grew some grain corn, which was great last year because out in the west, all that corn was drying up. Mm-hmm. And the corn that they grew in the Meadows was as high as an elephant's eye. And when they harvested it, they had a good yield. And the price was high because there was a shortage.
No corn, right.
But they also have diversified into community-supported agriculture. CSA is where you buy a share, and every week they give you a box of vegetables of whatever's in season at the time. And they had, I think, 150 on their first year.
And that's certainly a very healthy thing to do.
And then you always have some great vegetables to peak of whatever season it might be. And now they're hoping for 300, 350. So check them out, Fairweather's Acres, on their website.
Now, are there links to these groups on your website?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure there's links to the various
like
farmers.
Friends of the Conservator?
Yeah, we do have an area of links.
Okay.
But that's more of those are
like activities? Or?
No, they're actually more other land trusts and land preservation issues kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One of the things we have linked to is the Hartford river gauge.
Now, what is that?
If you're walking on the riverfront in Hartford, which they've recaptured, thanks to riverfront recapture, you are about to go under the Bulkley Bridge, and there's a stack there where the river is, the stage of the river is gauged. And they
so you can see how high the river is that what you're saying?
So they can keep a record and see how high the river is. But they've also marked on the wall, this is how high the river was in 1938 and 1936 and 1955 and 1983 and so forth. This is how high it normally comes. And you're walking down here, and the river's down there, but that's
it gives a little perspective
of
the volume of water that's passing through this region at different times a year.
But there's also a website, two different websites that show the level of, one shows the level of the river and you can make it on a graph. It also shows volumes, which don't do anything for me, but the graphs do. And if it's normal, it goes like this because it's tidal, and high tide, low tide, high tide, and the other one also predicts the next 3 days. So if you're planning on taking a bike ride a bike ride through the Meadows, and you want to know, okay, am I going to be on a kayak, or you can check.
Oh, I'm going to have to check that out. Because, a lot of times, you kind of get in the mood, and you're all psyched, and then you get down there, it's like, it's water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certain times a year, anyway, which is the spring.
Yeah.
We're heading into,
almost
we've had a lot of snow now, too, so we'll probably have some flooding this year.
Yeah, last year
was really not bad at all.
Last year there was no spring freshet, and which meant there was the number of mosquitoes were almost nil. Because I think it's the water that comes up and goes down, leaves these puddles behind.
Oh, and then they nest down there.
Because if it's just the river, the fish eat the larvae, and everybody's happy. But it's not. It can be pretty tough.
It is. And then, of course, there's that. West Nile is still.
Yeah, well,
a threat.
We probably already had it, don't you think? Most of us.
have had West Nile virus?
Yeah, because it's just like a cold unless you're really
Sick?
unless you're vulnerable, in which case it could be
listen,
fatal.
with the medical
Yeah.
paranoia going around,
Yeah, I mean,
everybody's like, oh,
yeah.
West Nile.
Yeah.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So once you have West Nile, you don't get it again? Is that the story?
I don't know. I think there's some immunity anyway.
That builds up.
Yeah, so.
So what other things now? You're having the dinner on March
Right.
21st?
21st, yep.
And that's a Thursday?
It's Thursday night, which is the night we normally have our meetings. So it's the annual meeting, really. We elect new officers.
Oh, okay. Now, and is there a fee to go for the dinner?
The fee is $28.
And do people need to make reservations?
They do,
Which you can find on your website.
You will be able to find very soon on the website. Yes.
Okay. Give it a little. Well,
Yeah.
March 21st is coming up, Jim.
You
so
can join the Great Meadows
Well,
Conservation
there
Trust
we
on
go.
their website.
Where we
Yep.
go. Now, are there annual dues?
There are $15 for an individual, $25 for a family.
That's certainly reasonable.
There's
And you support a lot of good things. And it really is a good way, you get on your mailing list, and then you can, because we've covered a lot of, my head is spinning, and I'm thinking, I want to check that area out, and this and that, and I probably will, need a refresher course. So I'll have to join your group.
Absolutely.
And get on it.
Well.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, since we advocate for agriculture, the meadows are wonderful, fertile agriculture. That's almost why the European settlers came up here to Pequog, which stood for open field or cleared area or something like that. And but you can't have agriculture in the meadows unless you have upland. If you're a farmer like Anderson, you have the Elm Street area, which only floods every 30 years. It's floodplain, so it used to be a residential district. Now it's a flood agriculture conservation zone.
Okay, and
area.
that's kind of why you put your bridge is in that.
And our bridge, our bridge is actually, that's another. Remind me to come back to that, because so that's on 20 feet of elevation, 20 to 25 feet elevation above sea level. The rest of the meadows is 10 or 12 or 15 feet. And so that floods much more frequently. And so somebody like the Wilkes farm had land in the meadows, but they also had the 80 acres upland.
Because you would grow different kinds of crops.
Yeah, and for both, let's take Anderson. To make a living supplying corn, you got to get some corn in the ground and hope that it's going to be ready by 4th of July. You couldn't come close to doing that in the meadows because it doesn't dry out soon enough to plant it.
So
you got to be able to plant it on your upland that's dry early and get a crop going early. And same with Fairweather Acres, they have their upland and their
downland
and their lowlands or whatever.
So the lowland is really good in case you have a dry summer. The stuff
Absolutely.
kind of stays moister.
And you have the river
there.
right there. You can. That's one of the interesting things about the turf farm, is that they really need to irrigate when they're first planting, and you can't really depend on
rain.
Yeah, the bean farmer. It doesn't rain for a while. The seeds don't germinate. No problem. Eventually they will, and up they pop.
Oh,
He almost never has to. He has to build it up on ridges, so the water, when the water comes down, it stays down here. But the turf farmer has to have irrigation. So what the turf farm did, particularly in Rocky Hill, in that long field where the airplanes fly and so forth, that they dug an irrigation trench all the way across there, 1,000 feet across that film, and then they have a place down by the river where they can park their pump and run it back. That became the largest archaeological dig in the state of Connecticut. That field.
What did they find?
Well, they found, I think, half a dozen burial sites they dug up and then they
I mean,
replanted.
there are human remains there?
Human remains. There's pottery. If you go to the Rocky Hill Historical Society, they've reassembled some of the broken pottery. And
is this from American Indian?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Dating 11, 12, 1300 and on.
Wow.
Which is about when
That's very
corn-
far back.
Yeah. So we think about our 400 years of agriculture here, and they were doing it another 400 or 500 or 600
Before
years
that.
before that. Yeah.
Right.
And every year, and when you have a Hurricane Irene Lee event, you get 2 or 3 inches of fertile soil on top of what you've been farming all along.
So it's almost, so it's like a natural fertilizer,
Absolutely, yeah.
the silt.
Probably helped along by the combined sewage overflow. Who knows?
Oh, that's another topic for healthy alternatives.
We don't need to go there, I guess.
Well, you are a resident of that area.
Yeah, so just talking about the Wilkes Farm.
Yeah,
Because
so tell us about what
the Wilkes Farm, I mean, it was one of those properties that the Conservation Commission 5 or 6 or 8 years ago went around town looking at properties that would be worthy of saving, of
Okay.
open space that would be worthy of saving.
And where is Wilkes Farm?
Well, the Wilkes Farm itself is on Willow Street, just down the street from the school.
Which is now an elementary school. Used to be the kindergarten center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the name of it? Anyway,
I don't-
I hate when
I-
these
my kids are
senior
way out.
moments come along. But anyhow, just down the street from Webb School,
Okay.
and so there's the barn and the house and barn are there on the east side of Willow Street, and so there's 10, 15, 20 acres there.
Okay, yes, yep.
And then it goes up the hill from Willow to Goff. Mm-hmm. There's a brook that runs through it, and that's all hayland. And then there's another parcel on Thornbush that goes down to the back side of the 1812 reservoir. Say you put a kayak in on the town access point and paddle back there. You have to kind of push your way through the weeds and the stuff growing there, but you can paddle almost right up to the bottom side of the Wilkes Farm.
Wow.
Plot up there. Wilkes, it's a wonderful story, and which I don't think we have time to tell, but it's a wonderful story because it's a
brief
Polish
synopsis.
family immigrated to the United States and ended up in Wethersfield in 1913 or early 1900s, bought 10 acres, started a farm, and by the 1940s had 80 acres upland and another 20, 30 acres in the meadows.
Wow.
And we're milking 100 dairy cattle, something like
Unbelievable.
that. Or maybe, I don't know how many they were actually milking in 1944 when their barns burned down. It was the middle of World War II, so they also had a pig farm down on the Thornbush side. You have to ask Bill Knapp for the stories of that because he remembers that. But anyway, the barns burned down. So one of the things they did was the Signal View Farm, which used to be located on Maple Street, had a barn which is right about where Bed Bath & Beyond is right now.
Actually, that's where I live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So, and their farm had been bisected by the South
The
Steam
South Steam
Highway in
Highway.
the late 20s.
Yeah.
So they had a barn they weren't using. So they picked that barn up and moved it
No way.
over the hill and up the hill to...
So Signal View donated to
yeah,
Wilkes.
so Wilkes Farm took that barn, and it's the hay barn, but it's post and beam from the 1870s or 80s. And they put a nice foundation under it, painted it. It's in great shape. Then they also built a state-of-the-art 1944 dairy barn that had, sort of automatic manure handling things and that just gorgeous gambrel roof. And these stainless steel ventilators on the top. Next time you go up there and take a look at it, you'll see that, which served both of those things. I mean, the hay barn had served the Griswold family, Bill Griswold, that had that Signal View farm for 60, 70 years, and then it served the Wilkes for another 60, 70 years till they passed away. And unfortunately, their dairy barn, which they stopped milking cows in the 70s, I think. There's a wonderful article from the Wethersfield Post. Once there were 62, now there are 2 dairy farms in Wethersfield.
Wow.
And that was in 7. There was the Leonard farm and the Wilkes farm. And then, of course, they're both gone. But the Leonard farm is like Leonard's Way. It's a little road with houses on it. And the Wilkes farm, we preserved it. Unfortunately, it took 4 years for the town council to figure out that they should preserve the house and the barn, too, if they could. And they didn't work very hard on that, unfortunately. And then they, well, anyway, shenanigans and whatnot. But it's now preserved. And so now they need to turn over the rest of the open space to Park and Recs and let Chris Shefford and the Nature Center try to work on it. And you know, there's potential for grassland bird habitat. You could put up some bluebird houses here and
well, just the preservation of the open land itself, I think, is important. Don't we?
Absolutely.
You obviously
and you know, they're not making agricultural land anymore. If you dig it up and plant houses on it, that's it.
And one never knows. I mean, let's face it. Our farmland in our country is all big agri-farm, and who knows what the heck is in that food. You know, it might be nice to be able to, as a town, try to attract some local farmers and let's grow some local food.
They had an opportunity for a dairy farmer or for a guy who would come and make artisanal cheese, and they frittered away the opportunity.
Who was that now?
Well, there was a guy I found. The state ag department has a website with kind of like lonely farmers looking for farms.
Oh, okay, looking for land.
And people with farms looking for farmers.
Okay.
And I found this guy.
And you were the matchmaker.
And you know, he was up in Charlemont, Mass, on a little farm he rented from his family, leased from his family, way away from retail, but making this wonderful cheese that was winning awards and so forth. And he could have come down and fit into this farm perfectly. And
so who put the kibosh on that?
Well, they dragged their feet.
And then he got another offer.
And there was other things involved. In, for example, the fact that the town usually sells property by the highest bidder.
Okay.
And they hadn't figured out. Eventually, 2 years later, they changed the ordinance so they could consider other things besides
profit or highest bidder.
The price, and then they also began to offer an easement so that the town would retain the development rights, and the farmer would only have to buy the farm, the buildings, and so forth. But that's what's happening with Rick Nowak now. But it could have happened some time back. By the way, Rick Nowak and Joel Wagner, 2 local guys who were farm boys, but one works at Pratt & Whitney, one works in a skyscraper in Hartford, also cut hay in Wethersfield. They restore antique farm equipment.
Really?
And
because they just love it. I mean,
because they love it,
they do, right?
And so Rick's going to buy the house and the barns, and he's going to keep the house and preserve the house and barns. I look at it as they're doing for Willow Street and agricultural history in Wethersfield what the Aphorismos did with the Silas Robbins house, and what Jer Gettle did with the Comstock Ferry to keep it going.
Right.
And not have it scraped off and whatever. But anyway, so there's also some micro farmers in Wethersfield.
Where? Tell us about those.
One of the, Carol Griffin, is a young woman that you see at the farmer's market, and she is farming some of her uncle's farm on the corner of Goff Road, more or less, in Prospect Street.
Okay.
And shows up at presents wonderful greens and so forth at the farmer's market. By the way, Wethersfield Farmers Market. Yeah. It's wonderful and grown from little one to larger.
It's gotten larger, hasn't it?
It's gotten larger. They had a wonderful farm dinner. It was fantastic. what a beautiful night, stars through the trees and the moon, and it was just great. And we also have a lady in Glastonbury who's farming a 1.5 acre parcel of ours right next to the river in the middle of Glastonbury Meadows. And she is part of SPIN, which is Small Plot Intensive Farming, something or other. It's an organization and a whole concept, which...
And what crops does she grow? What does
she
grow?
does some microgreens, another whole topic, but...
You mean small little, microgreens.
Yeah, so they grow up and you cut them off.
Yeah, very, very nutritionally dense.
Absolutely. And sunflowers and tomatoes and I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff.
Wow.
She perhaps I think she hopes to come to the Wethersfield Farmers Market next year.
Yeah, we should have her on the show.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in talking to her.
She'd be a very interesting guest.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What's her name?
Brenda Sullivan. She lives in Glastonbury.
Brenda Sullivan. Well,
but,
yeah.
you know, part of the Great Meadows.
Yeah.
And the whole farming area.
So once again, we have on our, if we could give Jim's website, it'd be great for people one more time. I know we've been, here we go,
There it is.
www.G Great Meadows Conservationtrust.org, gmct.org. Well, Jim, it was great to have you on
Well,
the
I appreciate the
show.
opportunity.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll come back with some pictures sometime, take people on a tour.
Take people on a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
I think, you know, you and I are both sort of, I mean, I don't consider myself an outdoors person, but
You
I
are.
do get out every day.
I can tell.
And,
Yeah. Can't do it much more than every day.
But, you know, you don't have to be Grizzly Adams or anything to be enjoying the great outdoors, and you don't have to go very far away. It's a resource that's here.
That's
and
correct. Yeah.
I know it's really, it's benefited my life, and it's free. Right?
That's right.
It's right here, and thanks to your organization, it's being preserved and even attracting more parcels, right?
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You do our town a very big
Thank
service,
you.
and it was a pleasure to talk with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Are we done?
Was it good? You did great!
All right.